So I don't know how many of you have gotten to see the American white pelican fly and at close proximity, but they are enormous birds. They have roughly a 9-foot wingspan, which makes them very impressive when they're flying by. And so I was out with a client and we just happened to be waiting along the Snake River, hoping something would come out. And all of a sudden, here comes this pelican flying in close proximity and putting on a beautiful display against a shaded background, which obviously, if you're dealing with a white bird, that's going to help even more to pop it out. And it did have a little bit of sunlight hitting it, but what really works is that in this particular shot, you can see it hitting the eye. And that brings a lot of attention and detail right to that point that might not even be picked up on a lower resolution image, like on Instagram or something. But when you're looking at it in high res, you can see it very clearly and very sharply defined. And that really helps to find that a focal point to grab onto. For this one, this is a trick that I did a long time ago where I reprogrammed the buttons on my camera to automatically switch between one shot and AI servo. And the language is going to differ from camera to camera. On Canon, it is one shot and AI servo. And what that means is that if you're shooting one shot, it's great for a landscape where things aren't moving. So you focus and it's locked in. AI servo is a more predictive focusing mechanism. So it's going to use a little bit of artificial intelligence and try to predict where that subject is moving. So if you're shooting a landscape on AI servo, it's probably going to come out fuzzy because it's trying to think of things, it's trying to look for things that are going to move. So I set up my camera to switch between the two right away. So for moving subjects such as birds or a moose or a bear or something that's walking, AI servo is what you want because then you can track that animal's movements and keep firing away shots. So I have my buttons programmed to switch from one shot to AI servo right away. And so when I saw this pelican flying, I switched right over to AI servo, focused, and just started firing away shots. Also use the back button focusing because then you can just hold down focus and the shutter button and get a whole series of shots that are going to be in focus. And that's exactly what happened here. And you can see that eye is crystal clear and sharp. And that is what you want from your wildlife photos. You want that eye to be in focus because that, as we said, is where people are going to look. So the mountain bluebirds are always a treat to see, and some are more cooperative than others. And this mountain bluebird just happened to perch on a branch very close and made for a fantastic subject. You could see how vibrant that blue is. And I thought against a nice green background, it really helped itself pop and gave it a nice cooler color palette. And same thing with this, the eye is nice in focus, but you'll notice it's kind of up toward the center. And in this case, it's not really a problem because that bird is extending down to the left. So there is some natural flow going on diagonally across the frame. And there is enough space on the right side to give it that breathing room as it's looking across that way. Not a ton to say about that one, so let's keep moving. So for those not very familiar with the area, this is Brooks Lake up east of Togety Pass. So Togety Pass is about 25 miles east of the Moran Junction of Grand Teton National Park. So for people that are coming in through Du Bois and the east side, you'll probably pass by this area if you're going by Togety Pass. And this is Brooks Lake. This is just an obscure dirt road with some hiking around the area and a popular fishing spot and things like that. I was doing a hike up here and I just thought the few clouds that were there that created that shadow at the bottom of the mountain and then across the top of the mountain made for a stunning landscape scene. And then also that lake just reflecting the mountains and stretching out into the distance also just was remarkably beautiful. And so since I'm usually hiking in the middle of the day a lot of times, I don't often get favorite photos from my hikes, tragically. But this was one that really stood out and I was really happy with this one. The downside to this image is you see a lot of dead trees at the base of the mountain. That is unfortunately the pine bark beetle ravaging that forest. That is just one of the many downsides to climate change. They are decimating forests, and that is just one way it's happening. So don't want to dwell too long on a negative note, so we're going to keep moving. So I always love hearing the western wood pewees. We get them usually about May through September or so. And so their calls are very distinct. They're very just A lot of people would say drab or bland. I think they're really cute little flycatchers, and getting a good shot of one is really hard because they often like to stick up to the tops of treetops, or at least higher up than I prefer. In this case, I found one that was not very far above me, and I happen to have my larger telephoto lens, so I was able to get in close to it and find a really good shot of it. Don't have much else different to say from the other shots that I have of wildlife. It is looking off to the left, so I gave it some room to breathe. The eye is kind of close to center, but it also works because there is that strong diagonal composition going through the frame, both from the branch that it's perched on, as well as the tail feathers up to the beak, and what's called an implied line from where it is looking. Its gaze is going to complete that line from its tail to its beak, and that implied line from the direction of where it's looking is going to continue on past it, up to that top left corner. So again, an overcast day, worked out really beautifully and got some really great detail from that bird. This is another one from the National Elk Refuge. This is a Swainson's hawk that I was shocked let me drive as close to it as I did. I was just driving around the refuge looking for to see which birds were there. The National Elk Refuge, there are some amazing surprises if you're into birding on the National Elk Refuge, but a lot of times they're few and far between. So you're going to drive several miles and not see a whole lot, but there is the possibility of something really exciting there. And Swainson's hawks are just one of several, I would say many, raptors that hang out there throughout the summer. And this one, for whatever reason, was very comfortable with, with me getting as close to it as I did. So I just really appreciated getting this nice up close look and shot at this Swainson's hawk. And same thing as the last one, there's a nice implied diagonal going up from the middle and up to the left, following the shape of the bird. And then there's a nice line going off to the right. So you sort of have this nice triangle going on in the composition just from a bird looking over its shoulder. Now, this lake is Ice Lake in Yellowstone National Park, and this is a super easy hike. It's only about a quarter mile to get there. But what made this so special is not only the colors and the scene, but this is also the first backpacking trip I took my daughter on. And it was only about a half mile to our campsite, so it was an easy walk. There was a lot of how much farther do we have to walk, despite how short it was. But after she went to bed, I stayed up for a little bit and watched sunset, which at this time of year was like 9 o'clock, 8:30 or something, so she was sound asleep. But there was that nice little quarter moon and just a beautiful reflection, a really stunning scene as just the colors turned to pastel, as the colors turned to pastel at the end of the day. And you can just almost feel the quiet in this scene. And in addition to just being very sentimental for me, I thought it came out looking really nice, and I really appreciated it. You can see that moon is off on the right side, so it's not center, it's not distracting, but it's kind of a nice little accent off on the side. Fun little side story is after she woke up the next morning, on that shore that's pictured here, we watched a wolf go running across the scene. It only lasted a matter of seconds, but there was no mistaking it. And she looked at me and said, "Daddy, was that a wolf?" I said, "Yeah, we just saw a wolf." So that was really cool and really exciting. In addition to that, if you're a birder, there are common loons that hang out on this lake. Every year I've been there, so something to check out if you're into that. So as fall migration was beginning, there were definitely some rarities that came through. One of the rarer birds we get is a lesser yellowlegs. They do not come through every year, or at least they're not spotted every year. But there happened to be a pair that came down here this season, and that was really exciting to see because they're adorable little birds and, fairly common for a lot of people, but for us, they're a nice little treat to shake up the shorebirds that we do get, the few shorebirds we do get. And in this case, again, I got down low at a pond, and I wanted to leave enough room for that reflection. So it's really only the top part of the body pushing that top third, and the eye is close to the center, but you can see there's breathing room. There's that reflection adding a little bit of composition to the bottom. So there's a nice little bit of movement going throughout the frame. So one of my more popular photography workshops happens to be doing night photography. And in this case, this person wanted a specific shot, in this case the road going off into the Tetons with the Milky Way above, and they happened to be here at the right time. This shot was, I believe, late October, mid-October, something like that. And we stayed out pretty late because we still had a little bit more to go before the Milky Way got to where we wanted. But for this shot, I did not use a super wide angle lens. Instead, I shot this at 30 millimeters. So that allowed me to zoom in a little bit more than something like wide angle or fisheye. That really helped to give more definition to the Tetons and give them more sense of their size in relation to the road. But then compared to that, it also shows off the immensity of the Milky Way, because that core of the Milky Way at the center of our galaxy was right there above the cathedral group of Tetons. That really shows off its size well. And of course, since the Milky Way is vertical, especially this time of year, I went with vertical to try to get more of that Milky Way versus just something more mountains or something on the side. Going vertical helped to isolate the cathedral group of Tetons, which were the prominent peaks that I wanted to concentrate on, as well as the Milky Way above them. So one of the exciting things that happens every fall is Jackson Lake becomes a staging ground for waterfowl that are getting ready to migrate. And the early ones there, the early birds there, so to speak, were American coots. And so there were literally about 1,000 or 1,500 just waiting along the dam, pun not intended again. And so I got down as low as I could to try to focus in on one in this whole big crowd of other coots. And you can't tell that there's 1,000 there, but you can get a sense that there's a lot of them. And in fact, a lot of that foreground distortion in the lower right are more coots just kind of being blurred out because they were a lot closer, so they got a lot more blurred. And then fall came, and this just happened to be a really beautiful fall, and I was kind of happy that I got to take advantage because I got some stuff I really enjoy. And this just abstract fall color scene of a bunch of aspens just came out really beautiful. There was sunlight hitting that lower grove and not quite as much hitting the background, so it helped to contrast the foreground from the background and create a nice sense of layering, which came out really beautiful. And a lot with fall colors, you want to use a polarizer if you can. That's going to help reduce the glare on those leaves and pop out those colors a lot more and give you more vibrant fall colors. And in this case, you can see it kind of sticks a lot to the rule of thirds. That background grove is on that top third line, whereas that bottom grove is more following that bottom third line. And there's that nice thicker cluster on that left third line going vertically. And then a green tree happened to go up on the right vertical. So it actually adhered to the rule of thirds quite nicely. And that's just one example where it works out really well to try to adhere to that rule of thirds. And then, of course, whenever we can get some snow involved with a fall color photo, it makes it look that much more seasonal. And the snow on the distant mountains made for a really nice contrast, that cool blue snow, especially with atmospheric perspective, creating that extra blueness, contrasted really beautifully to those reds, yellows, and oranges that were actually being lit up in the foreground. There was not any kind of special processing done. The sun was hitting those foreground leaves and that grove and not illuminating much else in the background. So it helped to kind of give a lot more of a powerful contrast and dramatic lighting without me really doing much. It was just one of those things where you just want to be there at the right place at the right time, and this was definitely that. In addition, the fog and the clouds in the background helped to add a certain amount of moodiness and eeriness and really just kind of mood. So I was really happy with this fall color scene. It's a rather blue and shaded scene, which you're going to get a lot with shade, but that foreground grove that's lit up really helps to add this nice pop of warmth and create an interesting balance in that nature, in that landscape. And again, going vertical, this helped to create a sense of layers. There wasn't a whole lot interesting going on the left or the right. So if you want to try to add some layers to see things dramatically unfold from near to far, especially if you've got mountains, then a vertical shot helps to do that, because that's really going to focus on just how immense that landscape is, and it's going to sort of create that layering effect that you get from a lot of complex landscapes with hills and mountains. And then, of course, no fall season would be complete without a shot from Oxbow Bend in Grand Teton National Park. This is one of the iconic postcard shots that everybody wants to get. And this was pretty much the peak of fall color. There was a nice blanket of snow on top of the mountains, and happened to catch it with this nice lifting fog, which let Mount Moran peek through there through the clouds to kind of give you a little bit of the immensity of the mountain in the background. This was obviously a sunlit shot, but that works well when you got nice morning light. When you have a lot of different things going on in the scene, it's not too complicated. You have sort of a nice layout. The fog helped with reducing a lot of the busyness. It sort of created interest in the foreground and then just hinted at the background, which is always a nice effect. It kind of teases just how large those mountains are in the background. And then, of course, if the trees didn't do it, the waterfowl, the geese and other birds that are in Oxbow Bend in the water, they help to provide a nice sense of scale as well. So never be afraid to include something like a goose or something else in the foreground that's just kind of there to provide some scale. And again, this is another shot that works really well on the rule of thirds. Mount Moran is rising up along that right third, and you have all the fall colors kind of going off on that bottom third. Even the empty space at the top left, that's not really that empty because you have those fog layers, and it sort of keeps your eye moving around. There's just that little stripe of blue that is actually a leading line that brings your eye back to Mount Moran as you come up from that lone fall tree off to the left. And then finally the Northern Lights. There were a couple of just really amazing Northern Light shows this season. For this night, I can't remember if I was in a rehearsal or an actual performance for a play, but either way, I knew the Northern Lights were out and I was stuck inside for a couple of hours and it was kind of clawing at me. So I took advantage and was really happy to see on my way out, driving back to Kelly for the night, that the show had not ended and it was only just still bursting. So I made several stops along the way, and this one at the Flat Creek Overlook, interestingly enough, where we started, was one of my favorites from that night. There's a little bit of light pollution spilling in on the reed grass in front along Flat Creek, but really the Northern Lights sort of drown out everything and take over as the main dominant subject. If you're familiar with the scale of this area, you see Sheep Mountain dwarfed back there. So that really gives a sense of the immensity of just how huge the Northern Lights were this night. This was with a 14 millimeter because I knew with a large aurora display, I want to get those auroras and I want to get as much as I can. So I went with the widest angle lens I have, which in this case is a 14 millimeter. And again, there's a nice composition. You can follow the creek and the shoreline off to the left. Then there's a nice little arching from the Northern Lights heading off to the right. That brings you back down the right side. You got this nice circular pattern going on. So I hope you found this helpful. And if you did, please let me know. If you still have any questions, please ask them away. I'm always happy to answer. And like and subscribe if you have not already. Hopefully this helped you out. And yeah, thanks for watching. See y'all next time.